Hello, thanks for tuning in tonight to Answers for the Paranormal on a crisp, cold Friday night here on the east coast of the United States, April the 5th, 2019. My name is Bill Posey. I'm your host for the broadcast tonight. With me in his office over in Horsham, PA, my co-host Joe Marodi. Hey Joe, what's going on over there in Horsham?
Good evening, brother. Good evening. Yes, it is. It is crisp here in southeastern Pennsylvania. Yesterday, Bill, it got into the 60s. I'm walking my dog, and I've got my sleeveless shirt on with a thermal underneath. But walking down with no jacket and taking him for a walk. And today, I got a jacket on, I got a sweatshirt on, I got a thermal on. It was like 30 degrees cooler. So.
Well,
here where we live, Bill, you got to have. You don't put your winter clothes away. You keep them ready to grab if you want to take your dog for a walk. You want to go for a stroll. You never know what the weather's going to be like anymore in these parts.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's spring on the East Coast.
Yeah, it is.
Well, we have a great show lined up for tonight. We're pleased to have on a guest who we've had a few times before on our show, and we're going to welcome him back tonight. So we titled tonight's episode UFOs, Abductions, and Disclosure, a discussion with our guest tonight. So Joe Marodi, can you introduce our guest for tonight?
It would be my pleasure. And I think this is the fourth time we've had Joe on. We'd like to welcome at this point Joe Jordan of CE4 Research Group. Also, Joe was a participant in the 2018 film Alien Intrusion, which was released, I believe, in January of last year. So welcome, Joe.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Hey, it's our pleasure, and you every time we have you on, you have different information to bring to us, and we're certainly looking forward to what you have to share with us tonight. Before we go ahead, why don't you tell us a little bit about, for our new listeners who've just found us, why don't you tell them a little bit about the CE4 Research Group and the work that you've done?
Well, CE4 Research has been around for 25 years now. Originally, we started out as a group of MUFON investigators down in Cocoa, Florida, where I lived for 40 years. And as we started into the UFO phenomenon as MUFON investigators, we also found the people that were involved in the abduction type experiences. And as we started working with them, along with our UFO research, we realized that probably getting to the real answers on this phenomenon would come from people who were actually having contact, which were the abductees. And we separated ourselves from MUFON and formed CE4 Research. The reason for that was that MUFON did not have a format at the time to actually do investigations into abductions, wasn't a formalized process. So we separated and formed CE4 Research and went into abduction research, looking at trying to find answers to what this phenomenon was about on our own. But we always kept the information, the research, the findings available for anybody, especially our peers, to be able to look at it and try to understand what we were finding. CE4 Research is not any particular group of people. I'm the co-founder of it, and I've been with it all along since the beginning. I've had people that have been part of the group that have come and gone, and the reason I call it a group because I always have somebody that's working with me. Most of the time, it's just associates that are willing to participate and help out in the research itself, and I consider them part of CE4. So we call it CE4 Research Group. But it could be any different people at any different time. But I've been there all along with this.
And I'll tell you, Joe, being around for CE4, being around for 25 years says a lot. You guys have shared a lot of information, and it's striking to me because I'm part of some discussion groups, and every once in a while I'll come across a comment from someone or even a post that mentions Joe Jordan of CE4 Research Group. So your work and your group's work has some long stretching tentacles over these 25 years, and I think it's something that I'm thankful to God for that the work you guys do. So I don't know if you're aware of that. I'm sure you are, that your work is shared a lot by different groups.
And it's because of shows like yours that gets this information out there. A lot of times when you do a show, you'll end up with new listeners that have never heard this information before or heard of CE4 Research Group, and then they'll share it with somebody else, and they'll share it with somebody else, and it just keeps going. Mm-hmm. We never expected it to get this big, 25 years ago. We had no idea how to promote ourselves in the beginning and share the findings we had. But, our bigger boss, he had an idea on how to do it. And, and it took off, in ways that we just absolutely never expected. But I'm glad it did, because we've been able to help a lot of people over the years that, that were looking for a hope. But they just weren't finding it. It wasn't being offered out there in a way that would actually help them. So, I'm glad that we were able to be there and able to reach as many people as we have over the years.
Yeah, amen. Joe, I had to take some great pleasure in seeing a group that you started recently on Facebook called UFO Disclosure is Here for Christians. And some of the news articles and different things that you've been posting on there have been really, really good, and with information that you're not going to get anywhere else out there. So I wanted to commend you for that, brother, and thank you for asking me to join that group, because there's not a day goes by that I'm not on there checking out whatever's being posted. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's something new that I started into in the research that I'm doing, and I felt that this is kind of the avenue that I'm going to be taking here for a while. I think it's a change in direction for me, and we'll talk about it here on this show, because I've had people that have been, commenting on that Facebook page that, what do I mean by that title? And I'll explain that here on your show. I've been trying to figure out how to bring it down to a condensed version where it's easily explainable in a short period of time instead of taking hours, and that's what I'm working on right now. I'd love to be able to get this information down to a good 45-minute talk to where I could cover it and empower people, and I think it would open it up to be able to be shared in churches, which is where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we open up here on the show.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've really been encouraged by it, and excited to see, what's going on so far with it. So keep going, brother.
Okay. Beautiful. Ready to go, Bill?
We're ready.
Well, let's get right into it. Joe, the last time that we saw you, Bill and myself, along with Bill's wife, Sue, was at a MUFON conference. I think it was Cherry Hill. Was it, Bill?
Yep.
Cherry Hill, New Jersey?
Yep.
Back in the summer of 2018. At that time, you told us then that you were working on gathering some very significant information having to do with government disclosure regarding UFOs. So, Joe, would you share with us now what that information is?
I'd be glad to, and that will answer a lot of questions for those that are wondering about that title for that Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
last year when I saw you guys, I had flown from Korea, where I live now, to Philadelphia for that particular MUFON International Symposium. And on Friday night of that MUFON Symposium, we had a banquet, for all the people there at the conference, and we had a keynote speaker that gave an excellent talk, during the beginning of the dinner. And that fellow was Louis Elizondo, which is from that government organization, ATIP, that had been researching UFOs for the past decade or so. And, he's recently left the government and is coming out and talking about some of the findings that the government had working under that program. And it's the first time I really had a chance to sit and listen to him in depth to what he was saying. When he first come out and had linked himself up with Journey to the Stars group, and those guys there, I thought, I don't know if we can trust this guy or not. He's coming out of the government. He's saying, trust me, this is what we found. And we've heard this over the years, Mm-hmm. And it never amounts to anything but just more disinformation. So I was very cautious about listening to him. But when I did listen to him, and I was very carefully listening and taking notes, there were some key things he was saying that popped up in my mind to think, you know what? I know what he's talking about here. And he was trying to say, the way he was saying things, let me put it that way, was he wasn't coming out and giving us exactly what they found or what they thought this was. He was coming out and giving us enough information where we would be encouraged to take that and do further in-depth research and come across what we believe this to be on our own. They were giving us the tools we needed, is what he was saying. The way he was describing the things that they had come across that he could talk about was pointing to something that I was very familiar with already by doing the studies I've done over the 20-some years in this phenomenon. And what I was seeing here and what he was describing was just spot on to something I had already considered before. I just needed to understand, how do I turn around and share this to somebody else? When you listen to his talks, and there's plenty of them on YouTube, and they're all pretty much the same, when he's given the descriptions of these objects that they tracked, okay? They show the ones on film, they talk about them being tracked on radar, but they talk about these things, these objects that were being tracked, of not being like an aircraft, okay? They didn't have the wings and the tail and everything that would make it fly through the air. They weren't there. But the abilities of these things they were tracking were as comfortable in the air as they were in the water, okay? And as they were in space. In other words, they didn't fit anything that physics should allow them to fit. The abilities that these objects had to be able to turn at high speeds, that defies anything we have in physics, okay? The ability of this thing and to be able to travel at the speeds it has in the types of conditions, it doesn't fit anything physics gives us. And this is what caught their attention, because if something is entering our atmosphere or is in our earthly presence and is able to do things like this, it's got to be of some high technology, okay? Something that we have no idea about. So that gets the government's attention, because if we had that ability, there's a lot of things that could be done with it. And of course, that's what the whole UFO phenomenon research is about. Everybody wants the technology that seems to be happening with these events that they seem to be seeing here. But it hit me while I was listening to him what he was describing, in essence, because it doesn't fit physics, okay? What he was describing was actually what we would call as Christians a spiritual manifestation. Are you with me on this?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, you know, if I can take you back to a fellow I worked with in the very beginning of my research, Dr. David Allen Lewis. He wrote a book called UFO End Time Delusion. And in that book, he's got a chapter called Flatland. And he tries to describe the way these objects, how do I say it? The way they behave in our presence, okay, is very similar to the story Flatland from the 1800s, where you have a three-dimensional object that enters into a two-dimensional world and the effect that it would create. Well, Dr. David Allen Lewis took this information from UFO research and seeing the same things that were happening, that were defying physics that we know of, it was giving the same reaction as the story Flatland. So he says what we're seeing here is a fourth dimensional object, which Christians would call a spiritual entity or being, entering into our third dimension, which we know through Scripture that they can. It's happened in Scripture. It's recorded in Scripture that spiritual beings enter into our realm. But we're not able to go to their realm. Okay? And it hit me that what he's showing here, what this disclosure these guys are talking about, is actually disclosure of actual visitation or appearances of angelic beings, due to lack of any other term. Spiritual entities entering our dimension. This is what this disclosure is about. These testimonies that CE4 research found over the years showing that this has a demonic nature to it, the abduction experience. These entities can be stopped in the name and authority of Jesus Christ. This disclosure from the government backs this whole thing up that we found, that we felt it to be a demonic nature, demonic spiritual entity doing this phenomenon. Well, showing now their abilities that the government is sharing, that kind of backs the whole thing up. Okay? So what we're actually seeing here is a spiritual entity, a angelic being, so to say, manifesting into the physical. If you look in Scripture, you'll see very similar experiences happening. And the effects on people when they manifest is almost the same. And that's something that I saw right away. So what I'm seeing here is, as Christians, we just got disclosure. We got confirmation that, yes, angels are manifesting into our realm. The government's already, recorded it happening. They just don't understand what they're seeing.
Yeah.
And it's a deceptive angel, okay, that are doing this, deceptive entities, because every part of this is deceptive in nature. And we know the purpose behind this whole UFO phenomenon is to take our eyes off the one true God. So this whole thing is lining up, and I think we're way past the idea of trying to prove to people that UFOs are real, okay?
Right.
But when I say UFOs, I don't mean everything that people sees, is unidentified. A lot of them are just misidentifieds.
Yes.
Reminding people that are listening out there, 98% of all sighting reports are misidentifications. Okay, people were not seeing something unusual; they were seeing something that they just didn't have enough information to fully identify. And a report goes in as a UFO because we don't have enough information to follow up. But 98% of those are most likely something already man-made, or something that's a natural phenomenon that was just misidentified. It's that 1.5 to 2% of the sighting reports that are very paranormal in nature that are the big question of what's happening here. But everything that they're showing about the technology of these things being able to defy physics shows us that this is something else, because even if it's an extraterrestrial that's actually visiting us, they would still have to follow the physics of the universe. Okay? They can't just turn everything off. But a spiritual entity can. Okay? Because a spiritual entity is not actually physically here. Yeah. It's actually manifesting in a temporal mode when they come into this particular realm. And this is something, if you listen to the things that he's talking about, Louis Elizondo, and how he describes this, they talk about having them on radar, and then they're not on radar, and then they're on radar, and then they're multiple, and then they come back to one, and the high speeds that these things can do and the quick turns that they can do would kill anybody inside. So it's not something that is humanly possible, or even any biological entity possible to be able to handle that. These things, they talk about them being seen as physical objects, but when you zoom in on them, they become transparent. And I've got sighting reports where people describe just that, where they think they're seeing a solid physical craft, but when they grab a pair of binoculars or a telescope to look at it closer, it becomes transparent as they zoom in. So these things are only giving the appearance of what they want us to see. Okay, and that's again back to that deceptive mode. Okay, the communication, everything that comes with the abductions and the contact experience, along with the way the sightings appear, everything points to a deceptive entity, a very deceptive entity. So I think when you put it all together, what I see here is this fits everything we've been told about and taught about in Scripture about demonic entities and what they would be doing in the end time, okay, with lying signs and wonders. And the purpose of these entities being that they're taking our eyes off the one true God. Anybody that becomes involved in this phenomenon has that danger of being pulled away from who God really is. Okay, it gets you to question everything that you know. Oh yeah. So you put all that together, I think we actually have, as Christians, we have our disclosure. We now know what this is. We have the evidence that we've been waiting on to prove this is not extraterrestrial. This is a demonic entity that's here doing deceptive work. And I think we have enough to be able to put together to say we've got what we've been looking for. But the rest of the world, the secular realm, is still looking for ET. Yeah. Okay, they're waiting for disclosure to say this is what we found, and they're not going to see it. And that made me think of something else from years ago. The Brookings report, when NASA put together the Brookings report. They put a think tank together to go in and try to figure out what they believed would happen if disclosure was to come, if they were to announce that we actually made contact. And the Brookings report said that, it would upset everybody, a major group of people. And the people that they were pretty much talking about were people that believed in God, religious people. I think this is completely backwards. I think that, come to the truth, what we're now seeing is confirmation for the Christian realm that this is real, that these entities are real. These entities spoken of in Scripture are real, which tells us that this Scripture that we believe in is real, which tells us that God's real and Jesus is real. Amen. I think disclosure, when it comes out, and the reason they're being so careful, is it's the rest of the world, the unbelievers, the secular realm, that's going to be turned upside down. Their whole concept of reality is going to be turned upside down. They're doing everything they can to come against a belief in God, but they're going to get smacked in the face showing that, hey, guess what? This is real. You've been wrong all along. And I think that's going to be a major impact on society. So taking all of this, what I'd like to be able to do, and just putting that Facebook page up there, trying to share this stuff in a cohesive manner, which you can tell I'm having a hard time doing. But I'm getting there. I think the whole message here is now, are UFOs real? We're beyond that, okay? Right. We know what this is now. We have enough evidence to say we know what this is. We have disclosure. Let's move on. And I think we have right now the most powerful opportunity in the history of humanity to witness to the lost. Because we can take what they're already accepting and being deceived by and show them it's not what it appears to be. Mm-hmm. I think this is the greatest witnessing opportunity ever for the church right now. This is a phenomenon that if you go on the internet, which is the source of all information right now worldwide, your biggest two hits on the internet are sex and UFOs. Yeah. Okay? And I think right now this whole idea, this whole deceptive phenomenon of UFOs is a major opportunity for us to reach the lost. I think I want to be able to show the church, get beyond questioning this. Let me show you, this is real, this is what it is, and we have an opportunity to turn it around on a secular world and be able to share with them that, hey guys, this is not what it appears to be, and this is the outcome if you continue to believe in this. Mm.
Wow, that's quite an opening, Joe.
That is.
That's my wrist is sore right now from jotting down notes from what Joe just said. I got to shake my wrist out a little bit here, just to get the ball rolling from our end, Joe. Something that you said that is striking to me. When you said that 98% of all UFO sightings can be attributed to misidentification. But to me, that still gives a lot of weight to, when you consider all of the UFO sightings. Like if you Googled how many UFO sightings are there in any given year, put a number on it. Still, if you take 2% of those that aren't misidentification, it's a significant number. Would you agree?
Correct. It still is.
And which means that, that 2%, and within Christianity, you need to figure out what that is. From what Joe just, his opening, we should understand what's going on here. And with regards to that, Joe, when you talk about, we've already got our Christian disclosure. We got confirmation from this former government official. Do you think that within Christianity that there are still those who would rather have a biological answer for whatever reason rather than the spiritual reason that they have right before them in their scriptures?
Yeah, I do, and sadly I do, and I'm not sure what the purpose is. That they focus that direction. I mean, I still have Christian researchers that come at me and still try to say that you can't rule out the physical possibility of abductions. And I will tell you from my 25 years of research into the abduction phenomenon, it is a spiritual experience. It is not a physical abduction where you're taken anywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the battlefield in the mind that's talked about. It's totally deceptive in nature. It's powerful enough in the deception that people can't discern whether it's actually happened to them or not. It's impacting and traumatic enough to where that memory is burned into them to where they can only believe it to have actually happened. But we don't have any evidence of people being taken anywhere. People bring up, well, people have had scoop marks and scratch marks and, different types of marks on them. Well, that's easily explained too. It doesn't mean that it came from the experience. It means that these entities are using those to back up the deceptive experience. Okay? These entities have the ability to get you to use whatever they can to get you to believe the experience is real.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. And it's very difficult to try and explain this. But what I found over the years, when I first started talking to the people, I would take basically their testimony of what they remembered from the experience. I didn't use hypnosis in any way. I work with people on their, what they can actually remember. I know the dangers of hypnosis and putting people under.
Yeah.
You always have that factor involved of possibly leading the person, and
sure.
I see a lot of that in the secular realm. For instance, if you watch a TV show on abductions and all of a sudden it triggers these memories on you and you think, wow, where did that come from? I wonder if I've been abducted.
Mm-hmm.
And it sets that thinking in motion in your mind. And so who are you going to go talk to? You're going to go talk to your family doctor, right? Not.
Mm-hmm.
You'll end up in a loony bin or on medication.
Right.
So you don't want to do that. So you're going to go talk to somebody that'll agree with you and listen to you, right? So you're going to search out a UFO researcher that does hypnosis to try and get any more information that might be there. Well, if you actually look at some of the transcripts of the hypnosis sessions from these researchers that do this, you're looking for where they're leading the witness, right? Leading the person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that there. When they say they don't lead them, they're honest. They're not. The problem is the person themselves going to these people have already set the stage. Okay? They have suggested to themselves that they're experiencers. What they want is confirmation. Okay?
Mm.
And they're already setting up in their mind the suggestive idea that they need to fill a story. Okay? So the whole thing has been set up from the beginning. So I don't feel that it can be honestly done in any way right now. Actually, it probably would have been better if they had gone to their doctor and the right questions would have been asked and the right avenue been taken, not using hypnosis, There's other avenues to do this. So looking at that, I went back and I started talking to a good number of the experiencers I'd worked with, and I said, I don't want to talk about your story as much right now, except that I would like to take you back to the experience, but I want you to look at something else, And I would ask them specific questions, and that's where I found that something was missing. For instance, if I asked you to relive your birthday from last year, you could pretty much tell me everything that happened. And I could get all of the senses experience from you. I could say, was it cold or hot? You could tell me. You would remember. Where were you at? Was the ground, were you outside or inside? Were you on carpet, on hard floor, on sandy area? You could tell me and remember something that related to every aspect of our senses. But when I went back and started doing that same thing, tell me about this experience. Let's go back to that experience. I want you to tell me what was the temperature. They couldn't feel it. It wasn't there. There was no memory of it. Were there any smells? There were no smells. How could there not be? If it was a real event, you would have that memory.
Sure.
It would have recorded. So what I was seeing is during the abduction experiences, all of the senses weren't there. They weren't recorded in the memory.
Wow.
Only the sensational impact of the event was recorded. The story itself. It's like the person was given a play in their mind, but it wasn't real. It wasn't real life. It was just a play, which begs us to question, who's the playwright here? And that's where we understand that these demonic entities have that ability to give us that memory.
Wow.
So we're seeing that it's not a physical. They're not physical experiences. The reason I'm seeing mostly for the idea that it needs to be a physical ET is because they're using it to bolster another belief.
Yeah.
And that is the belief in the idea of the giants from Genesis 6, the Nephilim from Genesis 6.
Mm-hmm.
Because this all started back in 97, when Chuck Metzler had the book that come out on the UFO Phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about in there, as in the days of Noah, this similarity between what was written about in Genesis 6:4 was very similar to what we were seeing in the abduction phenomenon. So the only way to support that would be to support the idea of abductions being real. And the researchers that were promoting this in the beginning and still doing it today, they were pretty much using the research, that was there available from secular researchers like Dr. David Jacobs. And Dr. David Jacobs was using hypnotherapy to help people and get the information from their experiences. And that's where this whole hybridization concept came from in the abduction arena, was through the research that he had been doing with abductees under hypnosis. So I've already explained to you that most of these hypnotic regressions are probably going to be a setup by the person themselves, not by Dr. Jacobs, but the person themselves was coming up with stuff that needed to confirm that they felt that what they already felt. Okay? So they're setting themselves up for these stories, and the enemy's right there to come along and support it. The problem was that people are taking these testimonies under hypnotic regression as being literal fact, and you can't do that. Okay? We have no evidence to support them actually at all, that they're actually did happen the way these people say under hypnosis. But as long as you can use that research to say that abductions are real, people are actually being taken, hybrids are being made, during the experience, that supports the whole idea of Genesis 6. But the problem is the whole thing's based on a flawed secular research.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And I think the other problem with that is it doesn't let the person who is trying to come out of this experience fully understand and fully get free from the experience, because it keeps them in a bondage where they feel they're dealing with, they don't have the ability to deal with a physical entity, okay, that can physically take them. But if they can understand and let God explain to them that this is not a physical entity, this is a spiritual entity, and they do have the ability to put them in their place through the name and authority of Jesus Christ, then they can be set free. The other problem with them promoting this whole idea of it being actual physical beings is it gets into a fringe aspect of the research itself, not just only on the secular side, but mostly on the Christian side. And the sad part about that is these people got into this whole phenomenon. They got under the bondage of this deceptive phenomenon by dabbling in areas they shouldn't have anyway. So here we are trying to bring them, some hope and get them free from the experience. But the problem is we need to replace it with something that's firmly grounded. In other words, if you're going to get rid of all this crazy stuff that's been part of their life that's kept them in bondage, you need to fill it with something wholesome like the Word of God, okay? And getting them into a fellowship that they can be, educated about the Word of God and getting them into, Bible study and getting them to understand how they can have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. But instead, they get sucked right back into looking at all the crazy stuff again.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff that's is the same as on the secular side, but repackaged in a Christian manner. And because of that, they don't get fully grounded. They don't get a full Christian foundation that they need to be able to build a personal relationship. So again, they still live in fear and they still live in bondage from the experience.
Bill, I have a question based on what Joe was just talking about, unless you have another question.
Yeah, you ask your question, and I'm going to follow up with one as well.
Okay, yeah, because I want to ask and follow up with what Joe was. Joe, you gave your thoughts regarding the dangers of hypnotic regression therapy, and especially in terms of how it has been used in the alien abduction experience. So, Joe, would you say that most of our understanding of what happens during an alien abduction experience has come from hypnosis? What other evidence outside of hypnosis is even scrutinized?
There are other people that are looking at so-called implants that people claim they got because of their experiences, abduction experiences. There's a couple of researchers that are looking at that intently. You've got the people that end up with scars on them that are sometimes permanent, that they say they didn't show up until they had these experiences. People are saying that this is evidence of a physical experience, but it's actually not. They can't make that connection. Like I said, I believe these entities are going to use anything they can to get support for you to believe that the experience is real. When I first started into this UFO realm and looking at abductions, I had an opportunity to listen to Whitley Strieber do his talk.
Mm-hmm.
And he started the talk, asking people if, he said, who in the audience has got scars or scoop marks or any kind of marks on their body that they don't know where they came from? And, 3/4 of the crowd of 500 people there raised their hand, and he was setting the stage for these people to believe that they possibly had an abduction experience.
Yep.
He was making that suggestion that if you've got marks you don't know about on your body, it possibly could have come from an abduction experience. The power of suggestion is just so powerful. And I mean, we see it every day in commercializing, products on TV and radio and everything else. There's people that are professionally go into careers on how to get people to fall for something that you're saying, okay? To get them to follow the suggestion of, hey, you need to buy this. That's what commercials are all about.
Yeah.
That's how TV shows stay on the air, by getting people to buy the products that are on the commercials. And that's the same way the enemy's working here. The enemy is letting us fall for that suggestion, okay? And that's what captures it. That's what sets the stage for the whole thing. I hate to say it, but I almost wish I could take the time to learn hypnosis and to be able to show people how simple it is. I mean, you can go to stage hypnotherapists and see how easy it is to suggest to people to do things that they wouldn't. They say that they would normally do it anyway. They wouldn't do something they wouldn't normally do. And the thing is, I watched my own mother go up on stage with Kreskin years and years ago. And I watched my own mother cluck around like a chicken on stage. And I'm thinking, you're telling me that, she would only do something she would normally do. And I'm like, she wouldn't normally cluck like a chicken and stage in front of 500 people. To me, that she wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So when they say that, I think they're wrong in that. I think if done right, people will fall for the power of suggestion. And I think that's what this really is. This whole phenomenon acts like a hypnotic stage show. The whole experience acts like a hypnotic stage show. It's like they're being told by whoever's behind this, which is a demonic realm that we know, they're being given this idea, and they go for it. And it's only a suggestion, but they run with it. That suggestion becomes an actual memory that they can't get rid of.
Yeah.
I think I can actually convince somebody that they're an experiencer. I truly think a hypnotherapist could convince somebody that they're one. I mean, they could actually do a show where they could take somebody and actually have them to believe that memory is real. But they would have to go through the process later to tell them, hey, I hate to tell you, but it's not. There's already TV shows out there like that where hypnotists have done that. They convince people that. I watched one where they convinced the person that they had this red bicycle that was their favorite thing when they were younger. And then they brought the family members on, the parents on. They said, you never had a red bicycle. It was that easily done. And I think the same thing is happening. And I think that's what needs to be looked at. Michael Heiser and I both have talked about this. And the thing that needs to be looked at most importantly in this whole phenomenon is how people's minds can be changed, how their perceptions can be changed. I think there's more to learn from that than the whole idea of there being extraterrestrials. This phenomenon is just unbelievable when it looks to how a population or a person can be controlled. I think that's what needs to be looked at. That is what's important here. A whole society is being changed.
Yeah, it really is. Hey, Bill, can I just say one thing before you get to your question?
Sure.
In response to what Joe just said, I think it's so important to understand what Joe just said, that people that are looking for answers, that are quote-unquote abduction experiencers, and people not only that are experiencers themselves, but are looking for answers to what this phenomena is, that they're already, as Joe said, they're already very vulnerable and open to the power of suggestion. And it's not just confined to those with first-hand conference experience, that go to these conferences, that go to a hypnotic regressionist. Those people will take what they have heard from these people who actually perform the hypnosis and actually speak at these conferences, and will share that with the people that their own spheres of influence. In the same way that you guys were talking about the Facebook that you guys are part of in the beginning of the program tonight, that information is going to be shared with so many other people. In the same way, the people that go to these conferences and actually go to these hypnotherapists will share what they experience there and influence people in the wrong way. So it's almost like a war that's going on between information. So I just wanted to get that in before you got to your question, Bill.
Yeah, it's a great observation, Joe. All right, here's I had about 8 questions come up in my mind, Joe, as you were speaking, but this one it just keeps gnawing at me, and so I want to explore it with you. You made the statement that this disclosure for Christians becomes one of the greatest evangelizing tools of our time, and I agree with you 100%. here's my question, Joe. What needs to change? Okay, what needs to change in today's quote-unquote Christianity for believers to have that same vision, that this whole abduction, UFO phenomenon, there are so many who are, should we say, ripe for the harvest, but yet there are so few voices out there. I mean, you know, you do what you do. Joe and I have had this ministry going since 2010, and we've been, you know, ringing that bell. But yet, you look at Christianity today, and there are just there's just a disconnect when it comes to this subject. What do you think has to change?
Well, I don't know for sure what that answer is. You're right. We've been fighting, like you say. I've been at this for 25 years, trying to to share this information. I think we definitely came across, in the past couple of years of that extra piece that we needed. When Louis came out and started talking about the government findings. That, along with secular writers like Nick Redfern and Max Brewer and Greg Bishop, that are talking about the red flags of ufology, things that don't make sense for this to be an ET, that's support from the secular realm itself. They don't agree that what we do, that it's, a spiritual entity, but they know that there's something wrong here, and they're able to show that. It's gaining ground for us, but I think what needs to be shown, and it needs to be made clear, and I don't think it's being done in a manner that is effective yet, but what needs to be done is to show the church how the powerful effect this has on people that become involved in it. I don't think that part of it is being shown, and I think that needs to be shown. It needs to hit a church-going person in the face on why they need to deal with this. They know the effects of alcoholism. They know the effects of pornography. They know the effects of gambling. These are all old sins that have been around for a long time. This new one of ufology, is one they're not aware of entirely. They don't know what the real effect of it is, of being involved in it. That's why when you go to churches, and I've had the opportunity to speak in churches, you get so many people that have so many questions afterwards, and they want to tell you things that they've seen, but they've never been able to talk about it. And just the point that they've never been able to talk about it to somebody that would listen, that's a bondage in itself,
Sure is.
That's kept that person bound up. So we've got to be able to get it to the church to understand this is no longer a joke, that we've got what it takes. Your government is telling you this is real. This is not just us crazy researchers that happen to be Christians dealing with this. No, your own government has already come out and told you something. They're dealing with something. We know what it is, and we can share with you what it is. They're not coming out and saying exactly what it is. They want you to find out. Well, we know what this is, and we're going to show you. And here's the effects it has on people. If we can get that opportunity to show the effects, I think they would understand more and be on, and have a further understanding that this is the one thing that's bigger than all the other ones out there. It's bigger than people dealing with gambling. It's bigger than people dealing with drugs. It's bigger than all of that. This changes minds more than anything else.
I agree.
Boy, that's so true, Joe. Joe, hinging off of Bill's question and your answer, I want to bring what I think might be one of the roadblocks to having Christianity understand what the Scriptures say and trust what the Scriptures say, rather than what the world says. When I think of science, I'm exposed to, because I watch all sorts of programs and I listen to all sorts of radio, and I hear the influence that the scientific community has on what people believe today. And my fear is that the quote-unquote scientific community has infiltrated Christianity to a degree where they are changing, especially younger believers' minds. Or if they're not believers, they're in the congregations, and they're there because of their parents. So why is it so important, Joe, for Christianity to be leading the way rather than, say, science?
Well, we would have to have scientists that are actually Christians and understanding what we're seeing here. And I think there are some out there that do. But when I listen to what the scientists, the secular scientists, are taking this information and doing with it, it's just the opposite. You look at the scientists that are working with the Journey to the Stars group, along with Louis Elizondo, on this work that the government found. What they're trying to do is decipher this so-called technology to be able to make it advantageous, to humanity. They want to be able to use it for free energy, for whatever purposes, for military defense and things like that. The thing is, it's not going to be obtainable because it's not a technology. What they're actually seeing here is the ability of these entities. They're trying to duplicate, in a laboratory, this type of what they feel is technology. They talk about that. Louis talked about that. The whole concept of that. One of the effects they see of these encounters is a time-space distortion. It's one of the recorded effects of these encounters, UFO encounters, that they were able to look at. That time-space distortion is exactly what they're doing with the CERN collider. They're trying to recreate that time-space distortion in a laboratory. They're trying to do what they're already seeing happening in these recorded events of these UFOs. The thing is, that's not a technology that is going against physics, and what it's doing is that's the key part that I want everybody to understand. That's the key part that supports the idea that this is a spiritual entity coming into the physical realm. It creates that time-space distortion. That's an effect of that manifestation. And we're seeing that. We've already been seeing that through the UFO phenomenon for years. It's just that when the government came out and says they were able to document it and record the event, which proved it actually is happening, that was just major support of something that was already being seen. And what I'm talking about here, that's they've known about for years in the UFO realm, is this is what is called, it was titled by Jenny Randalls from England back in mid-90s, early to mid-90s. She came across UFO sighting testimonies of people who had this experience during a UFO event. And it's during the event, when you're at close proximity to the encounter, that time seems to slow down. There seems to be no noise. It's like you're enveloped inside of a bubble with the encounter. And the only thing she could title this experience is, she called it the Oz factor. Okay? Like the Wizard of Oz. You know, she went to Oz, but did she really go anywhere?
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything happened inside of that time-space distortion. And I started looking at these cases in depth, and I started seeing them everywhere. One of the biggest prime examples of it, and a great story to listen to, was the aerial school visitation that was done in mid-90s and in Zimbabwe. And last year, when I was at the symposium, one of the child witnesses to that event, who's a grown-up now, was actually speaking at the conference. And she talked about that experience. And what she's describing is that actual Oz factor experience. She's describing a time-space distortion that happened right there in front of these kids on this school playground. And that's exactly what the government has found, is that signature of that time-space distortion. In other words, this disclosure is what they're telling us they found is the moment of manifestation. That's what they've uncovered. Mm-hmm. You can actually record the moment of manifestation. And these are the effects that come from it. That's what's telling us that this is what it is. But the secular realm cannot grasp the spiritual realm. So they're calling it a high technology, something we don't know about, you know, or have yet to come across. But in essence, it's not high technology. It's these entities' natural ability. This is how they come from there to here. Mm-hmm. Okay? It causes this effect when it happens. Look at what happens when the descriptions of what happens when angels appear in Scripture. Mm-hmm. You know? What happens to the people that are around them? You know, the effect that it has. Look what happened to Paul on the road to Damascus. Mm-hmm. You know, same type of experience. Look what happened when they described the angel that appeared at the tomb. Right. You know,
right.
What happened to the soldiers? They all went out. You know, they fell asleep. They knocked them right out. You know, there's this effect that happens from angels manifesting into the physical.
Let me ask you something now, Joe. As you've just explained that, in Scripture where it speaks about the angels showing up in Sodom, going to Lot, and the whole ordeal that is happening there, where they actually come and demand that. You know, that the men come out to them. So as they're appearing there is a physical manifestation where they're interacting with people. So do you think, as Louis was speaking, do you think the manifestations have gotten to the point where they've actually interacted with our intelligence agencies? In other words, have these manifestations actually, do you believe, become physical? Or are they just on the peripheral right now?
I don't have an answer for that. I think that it could be possible. But when you say physical, it's still a manifestation, okay? That they're not becoming human beings, or they're not they're not becoming biological beings. It's still a manifestation.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's the difference. I don't want your listeners to be confused that they're manifesting and staying here as a solid being. Mm-hmm. You know, that I don't see anywhere that happens.
Right, agree.
They have to go back where they're at.
Yes. And
I think there's a major difference in the ability you'll see between a God's messenger angel and the abilities of, you know, the fallen angels or the demonic realm. Mm-hmm. And keep in mind, this whole thing, this whole phenomenon is a deceptive phenomenon, and it's trying to do one thing and take our eyes off the one true God. Okay, that's the whole purpose. Mike Heiser talks about it. I've seen it from the beginning. That's the outcome of this whole phenomenon. And the whole thing, I mean, these entities they're not stupid, in any way. They've been around for a long time. And it's almost genius when you look at it as a whole on what they're how do I say it? What they're pulling off here to be able to convince everybody that it's real, extraterrestrial. It's genius in the way that it's all put together. There's so many facets to this phenomenon that unless you pick just one specific part of it, you'll end up wandering to and fro trying to get answers, and you won't get anywhere. And that's something that I saw right in the beginning. This thing is so overwhelming. In the way it's put together, it's like an onion and peeling back the layers,
Yeah.
And it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. There's so many different avenues to it.
Joe, I wanted to ask you a question about age groups when it comes to the susceptibility to believing the popular understanding of what UFOs and ETs are, but I want to ask within the context now of the bride of Jesus Christ here on earth, the congregation that names the name of Jesus Christ, and the congregation is supposed to have elders in it that are older and have a biblical understanding of what the spiritual realm opposes and brings in the form of manifestation. Whether you're talking about greys or reptilians, or you're talking about ghosts or cryptozoological creatures, how do you think age groups differ in the church? Let's say, how is it possible that elders within today's Christianity in congregations all over the world have fallen prey as well to the cultural understanding of all these paranormal phenomena, rather than adhering to the scriptural mandates and understanding of what these things are, because they are the ones that are influencing the younger believers within those congregations. So how is it possible that we've gotten to a point where, Christianity was supposed to be, have these elders that have this wisdom, this biblical wisdom, have abdicated their responsibilities? How did we get to this point?
Compromise. I think the reduction in the numbers of attendance has led a lot of the organized churches to compromise, to raise attendance. Yeah. I mean, we see a lot of that in some of the denominations, different denominations, allowing things that were never allowed before, as society changes, to try and keep up the attendance in the church. And I think that's a sad thing. A lot of churches become more entertaining than anything else to keep people coming,
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a good answer. I agree with that. Bill, you have any more questions?
Yeah, I have.
We got 45 minutes left here,
yeah,
gentlemen.
No problem.
I have a few more questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Joe, earlier, and on some of our past shows, that we talked about the the name and authority of Jesus Christ stopping the abduction phenomenon, and you have hundreds of documented cases on your website regarding this. Now, recently, I've been seeing some posts that are saying that the abduction phenomena has been able to be stopped in the name of Allah. And I wanted to get your thoughts about that.
Actually, I'd come across that a couple times years ago, actually in Roswell when it first came up. And I don't have an issue with that. I think that the enemy's going to allow that to happen for a person to keep them under that deception. And this is something we came across in our research back in as early as 2004. One of the conferences we had in Roswell, Guy brought a lot of the secular researchers together with the Christian researchers in this field, and we made a combined conference where we had both sides of the coin on one conference. And one of the speakers that Guy Malone brought to the conference was Ann Druffel. Ann Druffel wrote a book called Stopping Alien Abduction. And when that came out, I thought, we got a problem. And working with our other partner, Guy Malone and I, and Pastor Chris Ward, we talked about this. You know, here we got a lady that's written a book saying that one of the methods that people have been able to stop these experiences were calling on a higher power. But there were other methods, okay? And here all along, we had been talking about CE4 research was able to show that we had the only way that people could stop abduction experiences. Well, now we had somebody with an author, a published book saying that there were other ways. So we talked about that with Pastor Chris Ward, and he says, what we're dealing with here is an issue of terminology. And he says, let's talk about this and look at the actual difference. The difference is stopping an abduction while it's happening, or, while it's happening, compared to terminating the experience as a life pattern. You don't see that with any other name but Jesus Christ. You might be able to stop an experience by wearing tinfoil before you go to bed on your head. You might be able to stop it by leaving the light on or your TV on. You might be able to stop it in any other way that comes to mind where you make the correlation that doing this stopped an experience. But the problem is continuing to do that every time you have the experience. Does it work? Okay? And we weren't seeing that. Something I was seeing with the people of using the name Allah is in the research that my Turkish friend Farah Yudorzu has done. She came across people who had been able to stop it in the name of Allah. She also believes that these entities are not extraterrestrial, but they're the jinns of Middle Eastern theology, which again, they're, deceptive beings. Okay? The problem with that belief system that I was able to gather from was these jinns bring you abilities, in trade for the experience. Now, in other words, they received gifts of being able to read people's futures or things like that, So it may have stopped the experience, but they were given something else deceptive in place of it, where you don't see that when somebody uses the name and authority of Jesus Christ. They're not under that deception anymore, where the ones that are using the name Allah have usually been given a trade-off of something else.
Interesting.
And keep in mind too that all of this, what I explained about her, Ann Druffel coming out with that book, it's, to us it looked like, here we were, first time ever bringing out and publishing testimonies that have been able to stop the experience in the name and authority of Jesus Christ, and then all of a sudden, we've got the enemy that's turned up the warfare. Helps somebody publish a book saying that, hey, we're not totally accurate here, So I believe what we're seeing is just an escalation of the way the enemy works. Yeah. Which brings me to something I came across years ago. If you're ever interested, your listeners there are ever interested in knowing how the enemy works, buy the book, The Art of War. When I first read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, the Chinese guy that wrote that, when I first read that book, I was just astonished. I thought, you know what? This must be demonically inspired, because it's like the enemy took the way they work with humanity and published it. Wow. So it's in our face, and we would never even recognize the truth has been staring at us all along. Because the way that you see The Art of War put together, you see that the way that the enemy's been working using the same tactics.
Incredible.
And there was another book I came across that kind of backed that up, was C.S. Lewis, the book he wrote called The Screwtape Letters. Oh, yeah. Where that one there is very similar. You'll see the tactics that the demonic realm is using to manipulate, humans.
Hey, Joe, I have a question in light of what Bill just asked about these demonic spirits, the abductions being halted in the name of Allah. Joe, are you familiar with the name of Colonel John Alexander?
I'm not sure.
John Alexander spoke last year at the MUFON conference here in the Philadelphia area. And I bring his name up because Colonel John Alexander seems to have come under all sorts of demonic influences. And one of those, I want to get your opinion on this, and Bill, if you want to chime in as well. And when you guys were talking, when Bill asked a question about an abduction experience being halted in the name of Allah, and then Joe, you in response to that, saying that the enemy responded to that by producing a work that said that these experiences can be halted in the name of a higher power, Allah, or whatever you want to say. This Colonel John Alexander at that MUFON conference talked about an individual by the name of Wayne Dyer, who was healed of leukemia. These were his words, healed of leukemia, and he was healed by spiritual surgery that was performed by spirits. So are we talking about the same thing here?
Yes, I believe so. I came across in my early research way back in mid-90s when I first started into working with abductions, came across people who claimed to have had illnesses that were healed during the experience, the abduction experience. There was one right there locally in Florida. If I remember right, she was a city councilwoman in Daytona Beach at the time. And she talked about her experiences where these balls of light showed up during an abduction experience and came over her body and everything and actually healed her of an illness that she had. So that was my first encounter with, healings by these types of entities. And I think that's just a further part of the deception to get you to, decide with them. First and foremost, where does illness come from? I mean, is it something that possibly was from these entities to begin with, where they just taken away something they had given to you? Who knows? I don't have an answer for that entirely, but I do see that, only God can heal unless it's something that it's an appearance of healing, because it's something, like I said, these entities gave it to you in the first place,
Yeah, fascinating. Bill, do you have anything further? I have a couple of things I can go to here.
Yeah, I saw something that that you had posted, Joe. This was a couple days ago, where you gave the MUFON report for March of 2019, and in that report, as it broke down sightings according to countries, I took notice that South Korea had 2, and I remember previously, in speaking with you, you had said that there was almost none in your area, with you being the section director for there, and to see that there were 2 kind of piqued my interest, and I just wanted to get your opinion about that, and if you were involved in any of those 2.
Yeah, I'm aware of the 2 that that they posted on there. Keep in mind, that 25 million, I don't know how many people are here, 25 million or so in this country. Just to get 2, it's still almost nothing. But there was a couple. That's something to be looked at. But keep in mind that as these people here in this country become more and more developed, you're going to see them start to pop up. Okay, I talked about this before, where as the country gets successful and developed, they'll end up with more time on their hands to where they start exploring these things and start looking at them. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is every now and then you'll have somebody that either watched the show and listened to a show, or saw the stuff and decided that hey, I'm going to give a report. But the average Korean, this is not an interest to them in any way. They are aware of it. I've talked about that. I was actually had one of my Korean friends here that wanted to show me that, and he went to the public library, the Korean public library, and brought me a whole stack of UFO books in Korean, and they're actually written by Korean researchers, and he said a lot of these books he had read in school, they shared the information. They made the Korean public aware of what Western society was doing and what they were involved in. But that's as far as it went, because as this country started to grow, people became so focused on success, that overrid everything and every interest that they had. And I've talked about that here before, is, this country is striving for number 1 in the world, and they're getting there. You look at people that live in America, look at the products you have. They're not Japanese as much anymore. They're coming from Korea.
Yeah.
What kind of car do you drive? Is it a Hyundai? Is it a Kia? What kind of phone do you have? Is it likely a Samsung? These are all Korean products. They're taking over, and it's because these people are that focused, on technology. They're right at the top and leading technology worldwide right now. This tiny little country, and that's because of the hard work that these people are doing and the focus that they have. They don't give time to crazy ideas like flying saucers. They know about them, but it's just not worth giving the time up to be successful, to look at it.
Yeah.
They're not opening the door, in other words.
Right.
But every once in a while, you got somebody that's got that little bit of time and got that little bit of interest, and they'll go and report something. But it's nothing that, these are misidentifieds for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I tell you, Bill, and right in line with that, let me ask Joe this. We're familiar with Elon Musk, who Elon Musk is?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, Joe, because you were talking about what Koreans are interested in. They're not interested in UFOs. They're interested in technology. And Elon Musk is identified with technology, if nothing else. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Joe, and Bill as well. Elon Musk tweeted, and I should have recorded when this tweet was from, but I don't know when it was from. Here's what he tweeted verbatim: nuclear alien UFO from North Korea. And it was an actual video that showed. I saw the video. I can't make out what it is. It's very odd looking. You would have to go and look at it yourself. But Joe, what do you think? What do you think? In effect, would this be a scheme from the enemy to have somebody like Elon Musk all of a sudden start to influence a nation like South Korea to start getting them to start thinking about the possibility of extraterrestrials as biological creatures from outer space?
That's a possibility. I don't know if it's a probability, but it is a possibility. If anything, attention getting.
Mm-hmm.
How about as far as one of the things that I've noticed over the past 20 years or so that I've been paying attention to the UFO phenomenon is the perception that UFOs are concerned and alien intelligence are concerned with military bases on Earth, and the fact that North Korea, their nuclear program, has been widely publicized and made well. All of us, we're all well aware of the nuclear capabilities of North Korea. Could that also be one of the deceptions that may be in play here? That UFOs are all of a sudden popping up over South Korea and North Korea to watch these installations.
That's a possibility, but the odds are, in the situation that they have here, I wouldn't doubt that you've got more secret man-made stuff that are doing exactly that that people might be seeing. One of the older Koreans that I work with, I talked to him about the idea of seeing unidentified objects, and he said that for a long time it was pretty much an oral tradition to not report things that you see flying over, because it could well be something that your own, government is using to protect you with, so that's something that I've thought about that could have been a hindrance to them doing sighting reports in the first place, because they're still at a state of, readiness between the North and the South, and they don't want to give away anything to the enemy. So if they see something unusual, they want to just ignore it because it could be something that, could be used against them.
Interesting.
And that's something on that report I worked on up there in Seoul, there were two things that could have been up there. One, he was actually seeing regular aircraft, but not identifying it as regular aircraft. In other words, wanting it to be something else. because the one he pointed out to me that he thought was the same thing he'd been seeing, I was able to show on, my radar app that it was an actual plane, and here's the flight number.
Here's the number.
But the other problem is then he switched to, well, maybe that wasn't it, because I see this thing on a regular basis, and the only other option there is this probably he could have been seeing a drone or something that's being used, for border observation, because we weren't but a few kilometers from the DMZ where we were standing. And if he's seeing something flying at night in the dark and it's not making any noise, there's a good possibility that could be a drone.
Mm.
And you wouldn't want to get involved with trying to expose that, I mean, I don't, not with my job,
Yeah.
I got a couple more questions, Bill, unless you have one or two?
Yeah, you go ahead, fire away, and then I got a couple more.
Sure. Joe, let's get back to Louis Elizondo.
Sure.
Refresh my memory and our memories. What position did he hold in the federal government?
He was the head of the UFO program called ATIP, the one that was supposedly a secret study on the UFO phenomenon for the past couple decades.
And what agency would that come under, do you think? Or do you know?
Defense, if I remember him saying it right.
Defense Department?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were looking to see if this was a threat to national security.
Right. Did he mention how these findings that you mentioned at the beginning of the program are being pursued by other, if and how they are being pursued by other federal government agencies?
I don't recall what he said on that.
Okay, so it kind of
he did talk about other organizations that are pursuing it, which MUFON is being one of them.
Right. And in regards to that as well, Joe, when you talk about disclosure, you laid out the platform that we should, as believers, take this information and have it be our disclosure, our official disclosure. Let's say that spiritual beings are manifesting in our physical realm. But do you think that the world will still require an official pronouncement from officials from, you name the government? Is it still going to be something where, you guys are talking about things that are defying physics, okay, but we want to hear an official pronouncement from somebody stepping to a podium that says, we have been in contact with extraterrestrials. Do you think, and I know that this is speculation, Joe, do you think that is forthcoming at some point, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Because I know that that's what individuals like Stephen Bassett and Stephen Greer are looking for.
Sure. But there's a difference in the way Louis is putting this out there. He's giving us that, yes, we found something. Here is what we found. You take and figure out what it is. And I don't think they're going to give us what it is. I don't think because he says it's not the government's responsibility to do that. But they're giving us what they came across. They definitely, one, there is something there. 2, here's the effects of what happens when you encounter one. Now, you do the research and put the numbers together and figure out where they're from. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much the message that he's putting out there, which is way ahead of where we ever were before.
Right.
And you, I'm sorry, you is the general public?
Yes. In other words, he was encouraging that conversations begin, and he was pretty excited in believing that by next year we would be speaking in a different terminology. Mm. We are so close. I got to tell you that. We are so close. So many researchers, leading researchers in this field, have changed over the years on what they believed this to be an extraterrestrial biological entity phenomenon to a interdimensional entity phenomenon. That's when you talk interdimensional, okay? To a Christian, that means, well, there's only one other dimension, and that's the spiritual dimension. They're speaking our language, but just using a different, vocabulary.
Yep. Here is the fascinating thing to me, Joe and Bill. And I don't know if you have an answer to this, Joe. Has science responded at all to what Louis Elizondo has revealed? I'm wondering how science is going to play a part in all of this. How are they going to respond to what officials within the government have revealed as solid, hard data that they have that can be accessed and researched? How is science going to respond to this? Because my fear always is that people will, even within Christianity, they will always defer to what how science receives this data, and they put out statements. They respond to what this data may or may not be. So I guess my question is, how are we going to respond to how science responds?
Right now, I think that the scientists that have looked at this information that the government has come across in that program, I think that they're accepting this whole thing, and it gives them an avenue of where to start to try and recreate what's been found. That's science's purpose. If this is whatever this is what they say. If whatever this is can do this, we should be able to eventually duplicate that. And that's how science looks at these findings. Science says, wow, that ability right there would be tremendous use for this or for that. So they're looking at how can we duplicate this? And like I mentioned, the CERN collider is already trying to do that. They're trying to create that time-space distortion, and where these objects are actually able to already do that when they appear. And the idea that they can do that without everything it's trying to take the CERN collider to do. I mean, look how big that thing is. Look how much money went into that. Look how much power that thing takes to drive it. And they're trying to create it in a little ball inside of a laboratory. And yet these things that are being recorded and documented that the government is sharing with us, they're able to do it at will with no problem. They're not seeing a power source. They're not seeing anything.
You know, Joe, when you brought up ATIP, something when I'm like, where did I just read about that? And I just went back to the you had posted the Filer reports,
Right.
by George Filer, who is the New Jersey State Director for MUFON, and sure enough, I read in there about ATIP, and I just want to go back over that real quick because something just jumped out at me that as you're speaking about this tonight, what George Filer wrote regarding this just set off a red flag for me. So anyway, he wrote that back in 2007, Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, in which Area 51 is located, who chaired the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, set up a new study group with the support of fellow Senators Inouye and Stevens under the name of ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, at the suggestion of his friend, billionaire Bob Bigelow, chairman of Bigelow Aerospace, a contractor to NASA. Senator Reid wished to gather information on the secret work being carried out outside congressional authorities and got an appropriation of $22 million for a 5-year budget. And then he goes on to say the investigations were entrusted to Bigelow's Aerospace by Earth Tech of Austin, Texas, an R&D center in frontier areas of science headed by Dr. Harold Putoff, formerly at Stanford. ATIP, under the stewardship of high-ranking intelligence officer Louis Elizondo, commissioned a still unissued 490-page report and collected 38 classified papers from a number of universities and research centers reflecting some of the goals pursued at the behest of the Department of Defense. So that report that you're talking about, according to Filer, is still unissued. What's that mean?
It's still classified.
Ah, okay. So this report that he was speaking about at that conference, he was just giving us a little taste of what's in the report. And
well, he can tell us that it's there, but he can't tell us what's in it because it hasn't been declassified yet.
Okay, got it. And it's interesting too, in that same article by that Filer wrote, he says that that encounter that you were speaking about was off the Nimitz in 2004, and it was called the Tic Tac Smoking Gun Low Power Warp Drive, and apparently there are some links to that on the internet, I guess on YouTube.
There's a lot of YouTube videos that people have done the interviews with Louis Elizondo. I've got a couple up on my YouTube channel, CE4 Research YouTube channel, and the two that I thought were the best, from what I've watched. One was the symposium talk that I sat in on last year, and the other one was one that he had done earlier, that he really gets in depth on trying to describe what they had, what this thing was able to do, and they're just fascinating. And now that we've had this discussion, if you go and watch those videos, you'll see how it just jumps out at you. What he's describing as a manifestation. It's just as simple as can be. But you're not going to get that unless you have the discernment of it as a Christian, and understanding of what God's Word says. Otherwise you miss it completely.
Yeah, right. Yep, I get what you're saying. Very interesting.
That's why I'm trying so hard to get this in cohesive language. It's been difficult, as you see, to try to explain this.
Sure.
Because it's so overwhelming, and I'm trying to work on this and get the Lord to help me to be able to fine tune this down to where It can be simply laid out and powerfully laid out, and so that a person not even familiar with the subject matter would understand what I'm trying to share and the importance of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this needs to go, in the future.
Agree. And what that does, Joe, is it makes prayer, our prayer life to take on another another thing to pray about. That Joe is able to do this, and that the Lord does help him. So,
I had an opportunity to sit with breakfast and talk to Jan Harzan, the international director for MUFON, last year when I was there. And he asked me about my research that I had been working on over the years, and I shared it with him. And he told me about the effects of the movie when it came out that it had on him. A lot of the Alien Intrusion movie when it aired. I guess a lot of the non-Christian MUFON members had actually seen it and were pretty upset that MUFON was represented in the capacity that it was, and he was getting a lot of angry phone calls, and he told me, I didn't know until I talked to him at that breakfast, that he had gone through all of that, and he said he stood his ground on it. He said, hey, this is another, it's another piece of the puzzle. It's another way to look at this. And every piece has to be allowed. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean that it can't be brought to the table. I mean, if it's part of this phenomenon in any way, it needs to be looked at. And he was all open for everything being allowed to be looked at. Until it's decided that doesn't belong there, it belongs there. It
does.
And I had, I was able to share my thoughts on all of this, what we're talking about right now, and he was fascinated with it. And he said, the one thing he said to me before our little breakfast was over, he says, we got to find a way to put this in proper wording. In other words, make it to where you can share the information, but not just get up there and give a talk and make everybody mad and they leave.
Sounds like he was commissioning you, Joe.
It sure did, and that's where I'm at right now. Is since I left him on that conference last year, it's just like, how do I make this work? And I've just been praying and racking my brain and gathering as much information as I can and trying to choose what's most important to be shared, to try and put this together. And I talked to my partner, Guy Malone, about it, too, and he's seeing it too, When it comes down to the most important information for Christians, I think this is it. Still, I think this is it. I thought all along that the testimonies were the best evidence ever, to be able to show what this phenomenon was actually about.
Yep, still are.
But now you add on top of that the government's coming out and pretty much giving you the whole thing of that, hey, this looks like, well, they're not saying that, but to a Christian, that's what we hear is, hey, look at this. This is actually happening, and it's giving this appearance, which we recognize as a manifestation event. And I think the two of those together go hand in hand, and there is no other information more important. And I really wish the rest of the research realm, the Christian research realm, would look at that and get off of this sensationalism news that is being put on out there, to get people's attention, to sell books, to sell DVDs. I understand people need to make a living, but to me, it's more important that we help people than anything else. At least that's the way I came at this ministry in the beginning, and I've said this before. The Lord said, take this message and put it back to where you came. Take it back to where you came from. He didn't say produce a DVD and sell it to them. He didn't say write a book and sell it to them. He said take this information and take you back to where you came from and help those people. And I've never charged anybody for the truth. You know, I don't want to do that. The truth was freely given to me. Why would I charge it to somebody else?
Amen.
You know, and then I have to go back and look at what Scripture, said when I first started learning Scripture. He says in there, he says, if you do my works, your needs will be met. And I've never had a problem with that. My needs have always been met. If I come out of pocket on a large amount to make something happen, to get me a trip somewhere to reach people that need need the help of the truth, it always it's like it never left. It seems like it's just like the story of tithing. No matter how much you're tithing, you never seem to miss it. It's that supernatural effect. And I see the same thing in the way I've been doing this all along. And I kind of wish other people would look at it in that manner too. If you're truly doing God's work, your needs will be met. You don't need to try and make money off of it. He will make sure that you work. He will make sure that you're fed. He will make sure that you're clothed. He will make sure that you have a house over your head. Okay? And I see that testimony in everybody that works that way. But for some reason, people have turned it upside down, and they think that they have to make it their life work. It's not their life work, okay? It's something that we were asked to do as believers, but we weren't asked to do it we weren't told to do it as a life work. Right. That we have to make money off of it.
Right. And
I wish people would realize that.
Yep. Joe brought this up just recently in one of the shows that we did. It's a spiritual gift, so why are you charging for a gift?
Exactly. And I see that most, that most of the stuff that people are charging for are frivolous information. I'm going to make people mad when I say that, aren't I? But to me, it's frivolous. It's interesting stuff. It's sensational stuff. It's things that make you go, But is it really worth anything? No. In the end, it isn't. And the people that are focusing on the whole end time scenario, there's 1,000 end time scenarios. Yeah. Which one do we focus on? Which one is real? That's not the way prophecy in the Bible works. Prophecy in the Bible is after it happens, you can look back and go, look, he foretold that. Right. It's not made to foretell it before it happens. It's not used as a fortune-telling tool. It's to be seen after the fact. And the thing is, it becomes, these people they end up spending all the time sharing an end times fear-based gospel, to people. And that's not the gospel we were told to share. We were told to share a gospel of love and hope, out of the book of Acts. That's the one we should be sharing. We should be able to bring people to Christ by showing them they can have life more abundantly through Jesus Christ. Not meaning more money or things like that, but a life that's better because of having Jesus Christ compared to a life that doesn't. That's having life more abundantly. That is the hope that people need. That is what we need to be sharing. And that is where this focus is. That's where my focus has been. That's why I try not to drift off subject on things. I see all sorts of stuff that'd be great to talk about, but that's not important. When it comes down to it, you got hurting people out there that have been through this deceptive experience that need help. Their lives have been turned upside down. Their worldview has been turned upside down. They need help. They don't need another frivolous thing to get off, wandering and chasing.
That's true. Yeah. Hey, Joe, in the last few seconds that we have before we have to end the program tonight, would you give out your contact information so people can see further what you CE4 is all about and what you have to say? They've gotten a 2-hour tidbit tonight of Joe Jordan's views, so give them some information as to where they can hear some more from Joe Jordan.
Okay. Let's start out with the website, www.ce4research.com. And you'll see the testimonies up there and most of the information that I've put together over 25 years is on the website. I actually have a Facebook page called CE4 Research that you can follow me more actively on. I don't do too much with the website anymore. Most of the work I'm doing is with the Facebook pages. If you actually want to contact me, feel free to send me your testimony, or if you've got questions that are just bugging you and you're not getting a correct answer on, CE4president@yahoo.com.
Wonderful. Hey Joe, this has been a long time in coming. Joe and I are just so happy that you were able to get the time to come on with us today. The information you shared with us is breathtaking as a Christian.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you guys for the opportunity to get this out there. Like I say, it's in the beginning. The more I'm able to have questions, asked to me, the more I'm able to adjust on how to answer them.
Right.
I'll take any help you guys have got, ideas you might have on being able to get this message, tuned in to a timely presentation where we can start getting it out there.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get it dialed in properly and written properly and ready to go, I'll probably go ahead and video it and put it up there, and then it can be shared with everybody that way.
Excellent.
But when we finally get it tuned in to where that's what we're going with,
yeah,
you guys got first shot.
We got first dibs, huh?
Yep.
I like that.
We'll do a show and I'll do the presentation for you.
All right, excellent.
That sounds great, Joe.
Joe, you have anything else you want to say before?
Well, I just want to say, tonight the encouragement for me, and I think the encouragement for our listeners, should be that knowing that Joe, our guest tonight, Joe Jordan, is keeping watch on all that we have discussed tonight. Joe has mentioned tonight that this is overwhelming. Really, this is really overwhelming. Okay, it can be overwhelming. So you have to kind of nibble at it here and there. Okay, so I think it's an encouragement to. I know it's an encouragement to me. I hope it's an encouragement to our listeners to know that Joe, who has been at this for 25 years with CE4 Research, is keeping watch, and will undoubtedly have Joe back on in the future, because these are times, and we know this well, because of the fact that we're interconnected technologically, because of information.
Mm-hmm.
So information is shared on a daily basis, not only on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis, on a basis that we can't keep up with anymore. So people are exposed to all sorts of information. So we rely on people like Joe Jordan and Gary Bates and Guy Malone to bring us up to date on what is happening out there in the UFO phenomenon research area. So, and we know that they're brothers, and they are going to look at this phenomena from the scriptures. So that's why we keep having them back on, and we're going to have Joe back on, we're going to have Guy back on, we're going to have Gary back on as it becomes necessary. So for me, the comfort is to know that you have people out there like Joe Jordan who are keeping watch on all of those things that are going on in the UFO community, that we can just contact Joe and say, what's going on? Do we need to get on? So for me, it's soothing as a believer to know that there are other believers out there who are keeping watch on these sorts of paranormal phenomena that are going on, that the world can easily be swayed by and has been swayed by.
Mm-hmm.
But the disturbing thing to me, is that the church has been swayed by as well. And so we're going to see how that progresses from this point on. And hopefully, as a result of programs like tonight and further programs down the road, we're going to be able to bring biblical sense to things that are going on in the world and make sense of them through a biblical lens.
Amen.
Amen.
Very well said, Joe. Well, with that, we're going to say good day to our brother.
Thank you.
Joe Jordan. Hope you enjoy your Saturday and Sunday, Joe. We're about ready to go to bed here on the East Coast of the U.S. But
That's true.
yeah, as Joe was saying, you know, the connection that we can have with the technology today is just incredible. So thanks again for coming on, Joe, and we look forward to the next time we can talk with you.
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for having me on. And I tell you, we're right at the beginning of a major change, and I'm glad you guys are there to be part of it with me. You know, we've got the tools right now to be able to make this change, and we're right at the beginning of getting the motivation part going to get people to help that tip over. You know, I think there's going to be a time where this whole phenomenon is going to be looked at in the past as, wow, did we ever really go through all of that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, so true, Joe.
Yeah, I look forward to that. All right, brother. Again, thank you. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you next time, all right?
All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, how about a big wow, Joe? Bill?
Yeah. Wow.
Joe's going. Is Joe still there?
I'm here.
Oh.
What'd you think?
Did we? Oh.